So, welcome to the podcast. So, it's Women in Leadership Journeys to Success. We're joined today by Alexandra. So, thank you so much for joining, first of all. I really appreciate it. And also looking forward to the conversation based on what we've spoken about previously. It'd probably be good just to do a couple of introductions from both sides, just so people know who we are. And then we'll kind of start moving into more around your journey and different aspects of that as well. So I'll kick us off. So I work for Interquest. So Interquest is a global search consultancy business. I'm actually based in the Netherlands, heading up our footprint here, and we cover risk, compliance, and regulation. And then it also ties into data, analytics, and also the product area as well. Over to you.
Fantastic. So thank you so much for having me. Alexandra Rivas, I'm VP of Client Product here at ClearBank. So I cover all of our accounts, payments, multi-currency, digital assets, and FX products that we offer to our customers. Been at ClearBank just shy of 3 years, and it's been an incredible journey from when I originally joined back in 2022 to really where we are now, which has been there's a lot for us to unpack today, just on kind of how I got here and equally where I see the industry going.
No, of course. And I suppose, just like you quite rightly referenced, it'd be good to start unpacking it all from the beginning of your journey, where you started, but also from where you are today. Clearly, throughout your career, you've had a very impressive trajectory at ClearBank and also previous employers. It'd be good just to understand your journey there, all the different areas that you've now kind of facilitated, and being one of the youngest executives in your current company. How have you managed that from a kind of more localized perspective, moving into international markets and navigating it so successfully?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been an incredible journey. I think kind of if we rewind to where I originally started, my first semester of university, I decided it was going to be smart to do winemaking. Lasted all of about 1 semester and then moved into a different university.
No one can deny that.
No one can deny that. So how have I gone from winemaking all the way to payments? But I think from that journey, it then kind of led me into something completely different, real estate. And then it kind of led me to this journey of meeting lots of people when I went to university that I actually moved abroad and worked in all of these different interesting programs. The program I ended up joining was something called Mountbatten, which was a 1-year program that I got to move from the US to the UK and have a placement at a bank for a year. So I thought, you know what, why not go from winemaking to real estate development into private banking? And so I went for this 1-year program with Citi Private Bank at the time. And from that, it just has really snowballed into all of these different things that I've gotten to do across my career. I think moving at a really young age, moving to the UK was amazing just from an independence perspective, you know, coming and learning so much from all of the individuals across that year that I did. Fast forward that, I mean, I went with Citi Private Bank to New York. I went from New York back to London with Citi, which was an amazing journey continuing the private bank. From there, I then moved to JP Morgan. Spoiler alert, I did a little real estate for a bit, which was super interesting and got to reflect on some of the things I did in university. But then that just really started to open my mind of kind of different things and things that I really enjoyed. I realized from my time at Citi, I loved product. I was working in a product area. And so that kind of then snowballed into then, actually, how did I get into payments? So I attribute a lot of my career to sponsorship and individuals I met across my career who really acted as mentors and coaches of how do I move into another segment where those kind of things that interest me. So I was fortunate enough at JP Morgan to meet some fantastic individuals that really guided me on, this might be an interesting area of the business. Have a chat with this person. And it snowballed from coffee chat to coffee chat to coffee chat to then landing me a role in the payments team. So I made it into the payments team at JP Morgan and then ultimately worked there for a couple of years and then moved to ClearBank. So my career has been anything but straightforward. I'd say I've tried lots of different things, but it's really helped me kind of guide where my next step's going to go. And I think the biggest lesson I learned throughout all of those jumps and hops and challenges and things of that nature is sponsorship and having a coach of someone that is there to champion you, but to guide you was the most important thing that helped me kind of navigate my career.
I think that's also really important as well, is actually being able to have the sponsors and mentorship there. And people don't promote it nearly as much as they should for continuation of coaching and mentorship kind of as you pass through your career. And as you start moving into more of the exec level arm, it takes on a whole new vision of kind of leadership. And I suppose just before we move on to the sort of leadership side of it, clearly you've worked at some huge institutions before, be it Citi and JP Morgan. How did you find the difference of that, sort of moving into a smaller, a lot more kind of digitalized business?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think no matter where you move, I think it is what you make it in the sense of like the excitement factor. Like I think Citi, JP, and ClearBank all had incredibly talented people, all incredibly excited to do what they were doing, which I think is great, right? I think it just represents the type of individuals that you get to work with along your journey. The main difference, I think, from going to a larger institution to a smaller institution, and particularly at the time when I joined ClearBank, is it was a lot smaller. So you come in and the role that you're going to do is the role plus, right? You're going to do maybe instead of doing A to Z, you're going to do A to X, and you're going to have a lot of additional roles and responsibilities, which I think is amazing if you enjoy that hyper growth, super, super fast pace, roll up your sleeves and just give it a go. Because a lot of the time, you're navigating new areas, which larger banks would have established. So I think that the key interesting things for me was a mindset shift of, okay, it's okay to go outside the boundaries, but going outside the boundaries, you feel uncomfortable, but feeling comfortable means you're growing. So I do feel like the ability over the last few years for me to learn, to grow, and to just have a different way of thinking is really where I feel like that was the big difference for me. It's just I got to try a lot more things out, which then helped me really grow as a young professional.
Yeah, I also think the mindset just suddenly changes because you speak to people in product or tech, and as they go into more fast-paced organizations, there's a lot more sense of trial and error. You're allowed to sort of do it's kind of succeed or learn atmosphere, and it's allowed to kind of utilize different techniques, put forward different thought processes, which can be seen as easier because the processes and procedures are being created. So then you have the ability to kind of influence different assets that you go off into, rather than, the big organizations, they do a lot, and you do see a lot of incredible people there, but they've got quite a lot of historic infrastructure, which can make it a little bit harder to kind of look at new product development sometimes, to then real kind of test technical expertise. And clearly you've been involved in these places, so you'll know a lot more about that than I would. But I suppose as you sort of navigate more of the tech and product development and also go to market whilst moving into more of the exec and leadership side, how have you been able to balance that by staying close to the product, but also understanding international growth and kind of team ambition?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been a journey of what works, what doesn't work, kind of trial and error to the point of, I'm a huge advocate of it doesn't work. Let's not just continue to try to make it work. Let's just pivot and move on. Like that is so my philosophy. I love how ClearBank operates because for me, I'm still very much being able to kind of see what's happening, understand what's under the hood, like how we're operating, the decisions that we're going to make. But at the same time, we'll work in a really autonomous company where people are really empowered to make decisions and to have those trial and error moments and to really kind of like push the needle of how we could grow as a company. And so I think that autonomy gives people a lot of sense of pride and excitement because they're making really interesting decisions about how do we drive the product forward. And so I'm really fortunate I have a fantastic team that I work with, that we work really, really close together of how do we continue to move at pace? How do we continue to make the right decisions? But then ultimately, how do we continue to bridge that with the wider landscape of just the payments industry? Yeah, I'd say there's no exact science, right? I think being curious and just always like ensuring that, you give the team the autonomy, but you actually understand also that does this decision help drive a strategy that we've put together for the next 12, 24, 36 months, et cetera, plus. And I think as long as we kind of stick to the really core, simplistic priorities of what are we trying to do and what is the identity of ClearBank, you will never go off track. And I think that's really, really important in my opinion. Like just setting the very clear goals, very clear priorities, and not trying to do too much too fast. And so I think that's just really where, as long as you're setting those clear objectives, it allows you then to say like, right, do our clear objectives help us meet that end goal? And the end goal could be, how do we make payments faster, easier, cheaper for the end customer? How do we ensure that cross-border payments ultimately become as frictionless as possible as we see the industry changing? And how do we ensure that we're making the right decisions now that future-proof us going forward? So I think there's a lot of things that kind of marry, but I think the key kind of piece is a team with clear objectives and clear goals creates clear outcomes and clear ways to kind of move forward. Without that, it just becomes a little bit of organized chaos. And, it's never an exact science, right? I make it seem so simple, like set a goal and everything's great. But I think it is just getting into that is such good practice.
I think when you're working in such a fast-paced organization, the chaos part is just natural. Because if you can make one part of it organized by having a clear set of goals, clearly there's agility behind it, because the payments area or anything involved in the digitalized space is so fast and so quick to change. The agility behind kind of pivoting your strategy comes second to none. And I suppose that ties quite nicely in with understanding how you envision the future of international payments evolving over the next 5 years. Obviously, big tech is something which is really incorporated into the development of data usages as well as the implementation internally. But clear, and it'd be good just to understand your thought processes on big tech and how you use that and how it's embedded. But then what other areas do you see impacting that space over the next kind of 3 to 5 years as the kind of organization, but also the industry grows?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the beauty of what big tech has brought is the simplicity of the user journey. I mean, everyone today, we have our phones glued to our hand. We go, if we take the tube or we take public transport or we grab a coffee, you can tap your phone. You don't think twice about it and you move on, right? So the ability to have something embedded on your mobile device that allows you to then just pay for things without even really thinking about it, right? That is the most beautiful journey for the end customer, because at the end of the day, they just want to be able to pay for something really simply. So big tech have really kind of pushed the needle and allowed for kind of this revolutionized way of making payments and the end customer journey really simplistic. Now, that's brilliant. Then you start to bridge though together of actually payments is a very regulated space, and there is a lot around kind of financial crime and ensuring fraud activity is monitored and controlled and tracked, and the end consumer is protected. There's so many things that start to come and marry for that. So from my perspective, I look at big tech, I look at fintech, I look at banks as a collaboration environment, not a competition environment. You can't do one without the other. And I think that is such an important piece of, I love to continue to revolutionize the payments industry. This is amazing, but just making it simpler, faster, easier is the goal. And I think that's why is that collaboration piece is tremendously important. And so I look at, how do banks like ClearBank, an infrastructure bank supporting kind of the plumbing behind the scenes, enable big tech to go do other very interesting things for the end customer and continue to embed digital wallets and all of the various things that they're trying to achieve. And so for me, I look at a few things. I look at the next 3 to 5 years. It is going to be a massive shift. I mean, there's the massive ISO migration that we're seeing for international payments, which is we need that data to be consistent across the globe so we can make things easier. Stablecoin is the buzzword across the industry. I mean, the US, we see MiCA in the EU, lots of things happening in that space of then kind of championing cross-border payments and underpinning it by a stablecoin. So we're seeing all of these really fascinating ideas and these really fascinating things disrupt the market. And over the next 5 years, we're going to see it come together. And I think it's going to come together in the way of how does an end customer pay someone internationally, and it is near instant. And it is not going to take 3, 6, 10 business days to have money clear and get just stuck and data gets lost or payment gets lost. That is a problem that is actively being solved. Now, I don't unfortunately have a crystal ball to say like next year it's going to be like this is everything, but I think there's many emerging trends.
Gold dust.
Exactly. I wish I had it, but I would say the biggest kind of thing that I continue to champion is we shouldn't see big tech or kind of other firms as being competition. We really should see them as a collaborative partner, and that partnerships are key to drive this. Companies are going to be best in class at doing a specific activity. So when you merge these things together and create those partnership models, we can go faster, we can go more nimble, we can do things that we weren't able to do before. So it's kind of finding the niches as well and then maximizing those outcomes.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying. When I look at the market, I always see the advancements as technological, the regulatory aspect, but then also market and economical impacts. And all three of those do a massive circle interlinking to each other to debate the success of an organization. Now, obviously, it's always a question mark whether regulations kind of help or hinder businesses. And I think obviously where it's such an innovative space, when you're looking at kind of product enhancement and digital infrastructures and the digitalization in general, the regulators are learning just on the job as everyone else in the actual organization. So it's an educational piece from industry to policymakers to technology organizations as to how we all work together to utilize what's there as best as possible, so then people can look at really maximizing the market. I think that's also a very good point, as making sure the collaborative bit is there to enable everyone to be able to do it, and then how they sort of complement each other for, you know, traditional finance or digital finance, and the opportunities, but also the challenges that are put against it.
Absolutely. And I think the regulator, you know, is trying to keep up with the speed at which the market is evolving, which I think is, you know, showing the times of like we're in this hyper growth innovative stage just as an industry. And how do you ensure that you are delivering innovative ideas, but at the same time, at the end of the day, protecting the end customer? That is always like the big point is, how do we ensure that all of these amazing things continue to protect the end customer? And I think that is kind of where, like, as these things move forward, is harmonizing those things is really, really important. But I do think, you know, there's areas like we look at Europe, we look at the instant payments regulation that's just coming down the pipe. Actually, the regulator's like, let's bring instant payments faster. But sometimes you're shocked
to like how on board they are.
Yeah, right. So it's you know, regulation is always that word. People are like, oh, you know, we have to make sure. But actually, I think it is there to aid us to also grow faster, which I think is fantastic, right? We want to service, again, this end customer to have fast, frictionless payments so they can make their payments online or make their tax bill or pay for a top at Zara or whatever they so choose to do. But I think that is tremendously exciting, as we also see the regulator coming to the table, is that we want to help support innovation. We want to help grow innovation. And so, you know, regulations kind of coming in line with that in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think it's some of them are kind of a proactive approach. And I think you kind of have seen it roll out a lot from the UK, and also embedding it into the EU. People are becoming a lot more adaptable as to how they actually do it. Whereas historically, there's always a little bit of friction to start moving into more of a digitalized space. But now it's become probably more of the market than what was the traditional banking institutions, that it's hard to ignore. Because even if you focus on crypto or products related in that space, they clearly weren't going away. So then how do they kind of integrate them in a sufficient way that people weren't going to be able to use them? And obviously, thinking around everything that you've done as well, you clearly have quite a demanding professional life, both from relocation, your wine uptake, your real estate, and then moving more into the product side. How do you find a balance with that between work and kind of life or kind of philanthropic activities?
Oh, well, I feel like there's no secret sauce. I feel like there's a few things. I think one is making sure that you carve out time for yourself, of just like very simple things. Like I really try. I mean, I know maybe some people don't have the luxury of always being able to sleep 8 hours a night, but I really try to get as much sleep as possible. And I know that's like, oh, come on. But genuinely,
that's so simple, I know but so many people just don't do it.
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, that for me is a super, super important thing. But beyond that, obviously, but I think it's really making sure you find those balances. Take a little short holiday, or sometimes during my day, I have a dog and I go out and I walk in the common for 45 minutes and I just don't look at my phone and listen to some nice music and decompress. I think sometimes just carving out little pieces and blocks of time throughout your day and just throughout your week really help you kind of break up the demands of a job. But I think equally it's planning things ahead and little short trips, or, you know, a weekend into the countryside, or just small little things like that you have to prioritize, or else, because if you don't, they won't happen, and you end up only kind of burning the candle at both ends, and it just feels really, really overwhelming. I mean, I fall into this often, so I would say I'm not brilliant always as prioritizing time as I should be, but I think also that ClearBank enables a lot of flexibility, which I think is fantastic. And they gave us a few bigger than ClearBank days, what allows us to go and do philanthropic activities. So like in the fall last year, climbed Snowdon through night for CALM, which is the campaign against living miserably, and raised a lot of funds for that, which was fantastic. So they also give us the time to go and actually partake in philanthropic activities. So that also gives me that kind of that banding to be able to support those things as well. So I would say the biggest lesson I've learned, because I definitely burn the candles at both ends, is prioritizing like one thing. I think there's a lot of things out there. It's like lots of personal things. Like, I'm not a morning person. I can't wake up at 5 a.m. It's just not going to happen for me. So I'm not going to be in the gym and doing all those things. But what I do is I try to find small pockets of time to just take a breath and plan a few things ahead, and that doesn't feel overwhelming. And also just cutting myself some slack, because we are only human and there's only 24 hours a day.
I think that's something we're all guilty of, is just being a little bit too harsh on ourselves as well. But also just remembering the activities aside, like what's important to you of events or charities, and kind of giving something back, I think is also a really good impacted way to remember the personal commitments as you sort of pass through the industry. And obviously to grow a career such like you have, there's times where you're going to let it slide, and it's remembering to kind of bring it back, and what is important, what's going to help you get to the next goal. Otherwise it's just going to feel like a struggle, and probably a little bit not as successful as it should feel getting to where you need to be. And I suppose kind of looking at it from a professional perspective against this, clearly you've gone through or worked across and been a part of and seen quite a lot of product development, product deployment, and just different product areas in general. And I suppose as you've sort of navigated your career successfully throughout these different facets and different organizations, from the enhancement of technology as you've kind of gone through that, how have you seen that kind of alter the product journey from like a development and deployment perspective?
It's a great question. I mean, I think in the last 3 years at ClearBank, we've really worked in such a model of continuing to iterate and grow and go faster as fast as we can to build, like the European bank, for example. Like, we kind of had the metric of, from the point of we put our first requirement in to actually kind of building the European bank and being certified, we did it in 9 months. So it was kind of from that very first ticket into the end of that. And so we really learned on kind of, how do you start something up from the ground up? How do you kind of grow as an institution? And how do you sort of develop product and tech in the best possible way to ensure that you're meeting your end goals? I think there's many different ways and many different types of kind of frameworks that you can do to build product faster and work with the engineering teams in the right way. I think the biggest thing that I've seen is when you have a product team working harmoniously with your engineering team, and then the product team really champions the what, the how, the why, the so what of that product, and really the vision, what we're trying to achieve, and really brings the engineering team along that journey. And we work in, again, that collaboration piece of product and tech working as a partnership and really growing that business or that new product together. That's where you see that's where the special sauce is. Like, that is the sweet spot of actually being able to deliver products faster, having a really clear scope of what we're delivering. We're not kind of all over the place. The moment you lose kind of the clarity of the why we're building something or what we're building, or having kind of ambiguous requirements around that, that becomes really complicated. And then we kind of maybe lose the mission statement of what we're trying to achieve. And so I'd say, like, from my perspective, going from, over the last 11 plus years, right, product and technology have really shifted quite a long way. But I would say the best outcomes, irrespective of the way in which you deliver a new product, is where you have your product and engineering teams hand in glove. And you're able to then pivot if things go wrong. You're able to actually look and lean into complexities of, we didn't quite meet that client requirement in the right way, and then you're able to kind of react and take that forward. You can be a more proactive, and you're really clear on this is what we're going to deliver, but this is what we're not going to deliver, and this is why. I'd say previously, probably at the very beginning of my career, we started very much on writing every single requirement up front and then having that hand over to engineering. And then you kind of build this really big kind of piece of whatever product that you're delivering. That obviously shifted in the way in which we deliver product now. But I think it's my always key thing is it's the so what. What are we actually doing and how do we deliver this? And when you have that clarity, it really makes things go a lot faster.
I also think, and you mentioned as well, kind of going hand in glove with engineering. I think it comes down to the lingo as well, because there's like the development side of it and the coding. And historically, it was Passover, and they build out this massive coding piece. But then, how does it actually impact or work with the product? What is the end goal? Do the engineering even know the end goal? Or have they seen something and just gone Python crazy? And it is around having everyone together and understanding the vision and the mission and the why, being all on board with it to be able to actually deliver where you need to go to. And I think that is something where there's a lot of disparity between the two, particularly as then you move to business. So you have engineering, product and business, which is why we've also seen quite a lot of business and execution come a lot together, where they used to be leaders, and the execution side is having people with a foot in both sides of the fence of how and what do we need to do as a business for a strategy, but also being able to go in, execute it themselves rather than pass over to different teams, because otherwise you then have a little bit more of too many cooks in the kitchen and too many ideas and Chinese whispers sometimes, where they're trying to sort of narrow it down. And it's quite interesting to see how the industry has sort of navigated its way kind of naturally towards that outcome rather than an enforcement.
Yeah. And I just think it's so important that as we now think about product development, and I think this is something ClearBank does really, really well at, is having those, again, kind of going back to the clear objectives and the clear goals of, okay, we want to do this new product delivery this year or this new product development. Great. What does that actually mean? And not just looking at it from this is how we build it, because, okay, great, this is how we build it. But actually, what does it mean from how do we bring this to market? What is our target addressable market? How do we actually commercialize this? How do we actually operationalize this within the team? And so it's thinking about things from a perspective of the full end-to-end journey, from the point in which we kind of have that vision to the point in which we ship it in the market and commercialize it. I think it's really, really important. And I think the way in which our product and engineering teams work is actually understanding that full picture, and that we have buy-in from stakeholders early on, and we're kind of iterating based on the feedback that we have, which I think is tremendously, tremendously important. As you know, as ClearBank, we launch a lot of new interesting things all of the time. And I think for us, it's ensuring that having that continuity is really, really, really important, because if you lose sight of kind of the end and the commercialization piece, you're going to build something and then you're going to go and bring it to the market. And you're like, oh, sugar. How do we commercialize this, right? And that's not a position anyone wants to be in when you're kind of building things and doing it quickly. So I think it's marrying up everyone, and everyone has such a critical role to play in the sense of what we do. And I think it's so, so important keeping the mission statement of that particular product that you want to deploy really, really simple. What outcomes does this achieve? How does it achieve it? Who is this for? Like the basic questions that everyone's like, yeah, Alex, I know. But actually sometimes like the most simple questions and such a simple vision statement about something really provides clarity.
100%. And you see it more, and this kind of goes into the more commercialized side of it, is companies are becoming, rather than product and commercial, user obsessed. What is the user doing? How is the user doing it? What are the insights we have against the user for the product development? Because essentially that's going to be where the commerciality comes from. And it's having that sort of obsession with that entire user journey, which then also adds to sort of product development and creation as well, because you start seeing different market insights and avenues, which you may not have noticed historically if you kind of just follow one particular way.
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
It's probably a lot more easy for you guys to follow as well, because you can.
I think it's just so important at the end of the day, especially a lot, ClearBank or Fintechs or whoever, it's what problem are we solving? And so if we kind of look at various markets in the UK, we work with a whole raft of different types of customers. At the end of the day, it's what are we solving? Because if we kind of go back to the very basics of, okay, customer wants to move money from A to B account, and they want to do this in these kind of ways. Okay, we take that and we can expand upon it of how do we do that today, and what can we do to enhance that journey? It's then kind of the building blocks back to always going back to the fundamentals and then going back up from there. And it's then how do you then marry again the changing regulatory environment, kind of the new market entrance into the market. How does big tech continue to kind of drive their user experience, and then you marry everything into that. So it all kind of comes back to how do we build things in a fast, efficient way that meets the customer needs. How do we continue to champion and challenge the market to ensure that we are pushing the needle and we're not just kind of hanging out with a status quo of, this is fine, let's just continue to iterate that. Like, how do we be better? And how do we ensure that the end customer is getting the benefit from that, which I think is so important. And then it's always just coming back to the core question of what problem are we solving? Because if you're trying to solve a problem without really knowing actually what the problem is, well, then you'll deviate from the whole problem in itself. Exactly.
Like you say, kind of sometimes it's easy to just get carried away, but when you stop and think, and I always say kind of take it back to basics. Why are we doing this? What are we doing it for? Are we solving a problem or just experimenting? And what is it we kind of want to get out of it? Because I always think if you start a project without a clear goal of this is what I want out of it, you're kind of not really going to come to a conclusion with it, because anything's a positive at that point.
Yeah. And I think it's just like anything, like you can take it from, even if you like host a meeting and you host a meeting without an agenda and everyone kind of rocks up and there's no agenda and there's no clear objective of what you're meant to cover in those 30 minutes. I take that like kind of same concept. And if you apply it to a product, okay, if you come and everyone's like, right, why are we here? What are we trying to do? And you haven't actually set the clear objectives. Again, everyone's kind of sitting there like, what's the purpose? And so it's kind of like any single thing that you do. I think it's just coming back to like really clear, very clear boundaries on what the intention is, what the purpose is, and what the purpose is not. Because I think that is really helps people not going off piece of like going over here and starting to problem solve other areas. It's coming back to the mission statement of what are we looking at? What do we want to achieve? What are the outcomes that we're trying to really meet? And then you may go through this whole exploratory period and something may evolve from that, which is brilliant. Like that's just the innovation, right? And so I think it's then just really kind of, I'm such a key advocate for simplicity. I think, I just, when it starts to get overcomplicated, that's when you sometimes have to pause. I say it all the time. Let's hit the big red button. Let's stop for a second.
Always let's go.
Exactly. Let's stop for a second. Let's just and are we kind of addressing the question that was originally the exam question, or are we looking at somewhere else? And then how do we kind of shape that from there?
Yeah, because it's the same agenda, which and to be honest with you, I think it's a really good analogy is, if you join a meeting, there's no agenda, you're unsure why you're there, you're not sure what you're meant to take away. By having a clear agenda, when you re-meet, that agenda may change because obviously there's developments in the process. And that doesn't mean the exam question's going to not be added into multiple questions or different assets that different people have to take away. But it's having one clear area at the very beginning to then, if it does go to a point where the overcomplication comes, like you mentioned, hit that big red button and just kind of see where you're looking to land. And I think that kind of ties in nicely with kind of reflecting across your career, as we have done, and also mentioned across your philanthropic activities and how you balance that personal life. Kind of what achievements throughout your career would you say you're most proud of? But then I also think it's nice to know what lessons you've learned along the way as well.
Yeah. I feel incredibly fortunate and proud of everything that we've achieved at ClearBank. I think, going on the journey of building out our European bank, that has been probably my most proud moment of kind of getting that official, the regulator saying like, you have passed, you're certified, you're ready to roll, like that feeling, and seeing the team and the excitement across product engineering, but just the wider business was something that is just honestly the greatest feeling in the world. It's like, we've done it, and it's not been easy and it's been complicated, but we've done that as a team. And I think that for me has been such a proud moment. I think a few lessons along the way. I think one is if you're uncomfortable, you're doing something right. Because I think when you're uncomfortable, you're learning and you're growing. And that's a really, really important piece. And that's something I had to learn is like sometimes sitting in the discomfort is actually a really good thing, because at the back of it, you've learned, you've grown, you now know how to navigate different situations. I think don't underestimate motivating the wider team. And so, you know, I think when things get really complicated, people get stressed naturally, right? That is a natural response for things to get stressful. And just kind of taking a step back and reminding people, like, you're doing a brilliant job and this is so exciting. And not many people have built a European bank in the EU in a really long time, right? Like that is a really exciting journey to be on. And don't underestimate, you know, it is not easy. And I think motivating and getting people excited and just in kind of leading by example of that being, you know, excitable every day is so important. It's even if you're having a challenging day, it's showing up for your teammates and it's showing up to actually be like, we're in this, we're working towards the same mission, and get people excited is so important. And so it's not underestimating actually just those calls sometimes just to motivate and get people excited is fundamentally one of the most important things, because the moment people don't feel that, you know, it feels demotivating. And I think from my perspective, it's don't sweat the small stuff. And I know that probably sounds so cliche. And I know genuinely it's like I've heard it, but genuinely, you know, as I was going through this, I would tend to sweat tiny little things and I would just beat myself up over it. And I would think about it and it, you know, I'd go on that kind of merry-go-round of looping around those small things. And it's just being okay, like failing isn't a bad thing, or making a mistake isn't a bad thing. It's a learning exercise. And being easy on yourself and being like, well, that didn't work out, but the ability to kind of move on is so, so important. And I think that goes back into then having trusted folks, whether it's a coach, a mentor, a colleague, a peer, that you can just kind of chat through those moments of like, right, I'm feeling a bit down about the situation. You know, think I made a mistake here. Navigating that is tremendously important, so that you are able to then disconnect your personal life to your work life, and you're able to kind of balance, and you're not, you know, leading into your personal life thinking about all these situations, and being able to kind of give yourself, you know, give yourself a little break. Like no one's perfect, everyone's human.
Yeah, I think that's also really important is when you're going through such a fast-paced organization, trying to achieve an incredibly big goal, there's going to be so many hiccups and so many times you're sat there with your hands in your head thinking, how can I change this? It's all against me. But then it's also a team effort. So how do you kind of keep work with each other to keep each other motivated against what you're actually doing, and just saying, hey, look, it's actually just cool to be a part of something like this. Even if today's not great, tomorrow's probably going to be something different. And then it's kind of balancing that with kind of emotive feelings, as well as sort of where you're aiming to get to, and leaning on each other because you're all sort of going through the same pace. But then from a leadership perspective as well, it's being able to manage and navigate that for each individual personally as well as yourself. So it kind of encompasses a lot more different challenges then as you sort of pass through. And I suppose looking at it from the leadership space, obviously for young professionals aspiring to kind of follow your sort of route into leadership roles in the fintech space at a fairly kind of young age, what advice would you offer to them?
Principle I think of that's helped me drive my success is that sponsorship mentor. I think for me, it's not underestimating the power of someone having your back and kind of supporting you through that journey is tremendously, tremendously beneficial. And I think for me, I've had, you know, a few mentors throughout my career, and a few, I would just even say peers. I wouldn't necessarily, I would just sometimes go to them just to be like, I just need a bit of advice. Like, how would you think about it? And sometimes getting out of your own head of overthinking situations and hearing someone else's perspective is diversity of thought is so important, because one person never has all the answers. And so that is one thing I had to learn myself. As at first in my career, I wanted to answer every question, and I wanted to be that person that just knew every answer. Like, that's impossible. And that's just really unrealistic, and a bit just, you know, in my opinion, it was very naive of me to kind of think that way. And that's okay, because you grow it as an individual. And as I kind of sought sponsorship and as I sought guidance, the moment they were kind of like, why don't you look at it this way? Or take a step back and gave me some methods of, I use the Pomodoro method a lot. So it's set a timer on my phone and I write down maybe in that 5 minutes of what I think is most important in that kind of situation that I'm in. And it helps me just clarify, where I'm thinking in my own mind. Just little things like that, which you wouldn't know if you didn't kind of seek that advice, has really, really, really attributed to kind of my success. Obviously, I've worked hard and all of those things, and being curious and excited, I think, is absolutely 100%. But that is the kind of ethos I stand by, is being excited, being positive, and working hard. But I do think also it's taking a step out of your own mind for a moment, seeking that advice, seeking that clarity, seeking that guidance, whatever you need that day. That will help you so much navigate situations that you haven't been in before as a young professional, because as you grow, you kind of see these situations more, and then you can navigate those a little bit differently. But I think it's not underestimating the power of that. Yeah. And the best thing I'd say is seek a mentor or a coach or even a peer who is not in your business area, someone completely outside of your business area, which really then helps also. It's not someone who's kind of in the same mindset as you. It's someone who's going to be in a completely different area. That is really, really important, because that also then they're going to be thinking of their department in a slightly different way than we think about product. And then you marry together very different ideas that help you kind of blend your outcomes. That would be kind of that's a key thing that I think has also helped me.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously a part of it is very much from drive, ambition, and also putting dedicated time in, having the want to learn and look at different options and really sort of applying yourself. But I also think if you have your own ideas and you don't let anyone else's ideas in, you kind of get so far. Whereas if across the journey where you're going through, you're adding every other people's thought process, their ideas, you start to learn and grow. And you go from everything to kind of building across that and having different influential factors. And it's not a bad thing to not know everything. It's actually a good thing, because then obviously you're continuing to learn rather than not learning anything at all. And I always love the saying of, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're probably in the wrong room, because otherwise you're not really learning from the others, which are meant to be kind of peers and influential factors around you.
Exactly.
I always think coaching is just crucial, and mentoring and coaching is something which you should have no matter how senior or how junior you are throughout your whole career. And I suppose looking at it from what you would say to young aspiring professionals, and kind of looking to wind this down a little bit now, is a question I love, and it's a question I always love to finish on. But kind of, if you was to sit in front of your younger self today, what advice would you have given her at the beginning of the journey?
I think it would be three things. One is always be kind. Be kind to yourself and be kind to everyone around you. I think that is the number one kind of just motto that I have, is be kind. And I think it is so, so important. We don't know what individuals are going through. We're ourselves going to be going through things. Being kind is so, so important, because then it fosters. Pardon?
I said, and it's free as well. So
exactly, it is free. Exactly. Yeah, sorry. and I think that's it. It's showing up to work and being kind is just then fosters a way better and more positive work environment. And it's not underestimating, just kindness is so critical. And you can be kind and firm and kind and fair, but being kind. I think the second is patience. I lacked a lot of patience. I would say I'm still quite an impatient person, so I am learning. But I think I would get impatient. I would kind of just be chomping at the bit and just come on, like, I need to make the next move. And what I did kind of recognize and realize is finding your moment and knowing it's that moment. You will feel it, and it will feel like that pivotal moment. It's sometimes not jumping too soon. And so I always think about it as a runway for an airplane, and kind of you're building your runway so that the moment you can take off, you can fly. Yeah. And if you go too soon, ultimately that can be, really challenging. And so I think for me, it's that in my head, I always kind of picture that, because sometimes, there's been many points in my career where I'm just like, I want to move forward. I need to move forward. And patience has been something I've had to learn and continue to learn. And I think
I
the
know the
last one
feeling.
is just being excited. And
Yeah.
it's just showing up to work and being able to laugh things off, but also being excited and motivated and inspired to doing what you do. And if you don't feel that way, find something else that makes you really excited and really inspired. And, as I said at the very beginning of this, I've tried a whole raft of different things. I winemaking for about 1 minute, and then real estate development, and then joined a private bank, and then went into transaction banking. So I've kind of jumped around and saw lots of different things across my career. And I think the key thing for me is I feel like I've landed in a place that I get really excited about, and I get really motivated about, and I feel that I'm making a difference. And that is really, really great. And so I'd say for looking back at my young self, just not being afraid of it's not working, change. If it's not working, pivot. You're the only one that can change your outcome. And I think that was the biggest life lesson I kind of learned, is that kind of thinking that way allowed me to jump around, being like, well, I'm just going to give this a go because I'm not really happy here, and see how it goes. And it's landed me into a place where I'm incredibly excited.
Do you know, I absolutely love that. I love the kindness bit, but also the patience part. And I think sometimes we could all do with a little bit of patience for ourselves, but also for others around us, and having a little bit of patience in the process, but being curious enough to challenge the process enough that we're allowing ourselves to change. Because I think sometimes we don't, just from a place of security or a place of, would I be able to do it? Can I do it? And I think it's the belief that comes with that, which allows people such like yourself to kind of develop the career that you have and land somewhere where you're really happy by trying different things.
Exactly that. And it's just, and have fun, I
think that's the most important bit.
Exactly.
You'll work more than anything. You need to have a bit of fun with it as well.
Exactly.
Well, look, thank you so much for joining. It was really, really interesting just to find out a bit more about your journey, about what you've done previously, where you started from, even the winemaking area to where you are now, and just kind of your mentality and approach to all of these different areas. I find really intriguing and also fascinating. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been my pleasure.